The Witcher wants so desperately to be a better piece of media than it actually is, and while there's nothing wrong with trying to be a good show, the way they go about this ultimately comes across as pretentious and out of touch with the core audience. You see, the Netflix series often emulates aesthetic and structural elements utilized by some of Hollywood's best filmmakers. However, the show doesn't seem to understand why these elements work so well when utilized by those directors. Take for example nonlinear storytelling, a technique Tarantino and Nolan are both renowned for. In season 1 of The Witcher, the narrative is broken up into 3 distinct timelines. Now, this could have been a deeply compelling narrative device, but unfortunately, the execution was rather than establish a consistent structure or rhythm for the season, the timelines are intermixed seemingly at random. The earliest point in the story, Yennefer's origin, is explored in episodes 2 and 3. Geralt's story, which unfolds over all 8 episodes, progresses linearly but with random time jumps. Meanwhile, Ciri's story takes place in the future, progresses chronologically with no time jumps, before all 3 storylines finally merge in the season finale. So what does this convoluted narrative structure actually accomplish? Well, not a whole lot. You could argue that intercutting between Geralt and Ciri makes it feel like they're destined to meet, but then why not set up who she is from the very beginning? In episode 4, we learn that she's linked to Geralt through the law of surprise, but up until that point, watching some random girl run away from a poorly established antagonist feels utterly pointless. If you instead began Geralt's story here, the first episode could have intercut between him saving Ciri's parents and Ciri narrowly escaping the fall of Sintra. This would not only give the audience a reason to care about Ciri immediately, but also clearly establish that the story consists of multiple timelines. As it stands, the convoluted story structure adds nothing to the narrative and lacks any thematic motivation. By contrast, a film like Pulp Fiction shows us how nonlinearity should be used. Quentin Tarantino's second film doesn't really have an overarching plot, but rather an overarching theme: redemption. Essentially, each of the film's episodic vignettes focus on a different character and how they either succeed or fail in becoming a better person. If you laid out the events chronologically, it would look something like this, but in the film, they play out more like this. We'll get to why that's important in a moment. In Vincent Vega and Marcellus Wallace's wife, John Travolta has to take care of a mob boss's spouse while he's out of town. His one job is to make sure nothing crazy happens, but his drug habit indirectly leads to Uma Thurman overdosing. He manages to resuscitate her, but doesn't seem to actually grow as a person, seen as he's just as irresponsible later in the film.
Oh man, I shot Marvin in the face. Why the f you do that? I didn't mean to do it, it was an accident.
In The Gold Watch, Bruce Willis ditches town after double-crossing the mob. However, he has to return in order to get his father's gold watch, and after doing so, winds up running into the very man he was trying to avoid. The two wind up in a pawn shop where the deranged owner holds them captive. Willis manages to escape, and he ultimately makes the heroic choice to save the mob boss, and in doing so, proves that he has grown as a person. Also, he shot John Travolta somewhere in there, but we'll talk about that later. Most importantly, the Bonnie situation tells the story of Sam Jackson and his final day as a hitman. Jackson and Travolta miraculously survive being ambushed by the man in the bathroom, but Jackson is convinced that it's a sign from God and declares that he's made up his mind to retire from his life of crime. The two stop at a diner where they subsequently find themselves in the middle of an armed robbery. Sam Jackson manages to get the upper hand and explains,
"Normally both your asses would be dead as fried chicken, but you happen to pull it while I'm in a transitional period and I don't want to kill you. I want to help you."
The personal growth Jackson displays here turns what could have been a bloodbath into a peacefully resolved situation. Now, here's why the nonlinearity matters. If you told the story of Pulp Fiction chronologically, the themes would be far less apparent. Each section of the film shows us one character's opportunity for redemption and whether or not they take it. This is also why it's important we see what becomes of John Travolta before jumping back in time to the Bonnie situation. Knowing that remaining a criminal cost him his life adds an intense dramatic irony to the scenes where he and Sam Jackson discuss retiring. The knowledge of what will soon transpire makes the final shot of the movie so much more powerful, knowing how different the two men's futures will be. Do you see why I have a problem with The Witcher now? It uses nonlinear storytelling without actually understanding its purpose. It needlessly confuses the audience, all for the sake of adding depth where in reality there is none. But okay, that was season 1. Maybe they learned from their mistakes later down the road.
No. Excuse me.
So Netflix had the brilliant idea of releasing only 5 out of 8 episodes of season 3 this month, and it was all because they thought episode 5 was a standout episode that would leave audiences with a compelling cliffhanger.
How many other lies have I been told by the council?
The Art of Illusion sees Yennefer and Geralt attend a party on the eve of the Mages' Conclave, and once again, the show proves that it hasn't learned anything when it comes to utilizing mystery and non-linearity. The cold open begins with Yen and Papa G vaguely alluding to a party that has already happened, and we jump back in time to the moment the pair arrives together at the ball. While the cold open doesn't add anything special, the setup of these two attending a party with so many powerful people, all while the fate of the continent is at stake, is admittedly really compelling. Seeing Geralt forced into playing politics is an amusing change of pace for the character, and the tension inherent in every private conversation is great. There's even my favorite spy movie trope of important dialogue being delivered during a sultry dance scene. Unfortunately, this dance sequence is also a perfect example of why the episode fails completely. About 17 minutes in, the story rewinds to the very beginning of the party, and the events we just watched play out all over again, except this time we get to see parts of conversations we previously didn't, whereas the first time through we watch Geralt say,
Philippa, what a surprise. Catch any mice tonight?
And then immediately cut away to Yennefer's conversation. The second time through, we hold on the conversation for significantly longer.
What a surprise. Catch any mice tonight?
You know quite well I make my killing catching secret.
So yes, you told me.
The issue, in my opinion, is that nothing is motivating the new approach to the scene. The framing device tries to justify it by saying,
"We're not the only ones plotting tonight."
but that should segue into seeing other characters besides Geralt and Yen. Geralt was privy to the entire conversation with Philippa, so revealing the extra dialogue now doesn't make any sense. Logically, the episode should have shown the party once from Yennefer's perspective, and then again from Geralt's point of view. Doing this would justify the slow reveal of information and actually motivate the framing device. But rather than do that, the episode randomly cuts between multiple characters in order to create a false sense of mystery. And to prove just how egregious this tactic is, let's go back to that dance sequence. The first time we see people dance the melange, this is the dialogue they include.
What's the melange?
It's a dance. It's not optional.
However, the second time through, they say this.
What's the melange?
It's a dance. It's not optional.
Even for me.
Especially for you.
Do you see how the first time through, they literally just cut to a random wide shot so we can't hear important dialogue? There is no narrative reason this should happen. It only exists to inflate the runtime and create false depth. The only logic behind when we follow Geralt versus when the camera sticks with Yen is what will hide the most information from the audience. It's not a clever trick the filmmakers play because it doesn't follow any rules. Compare this to the non-linear masterpiece that is Dunkirk. Nolan's World War II film, much like season 1 of The Witcher, is broken up into 3 timelines, except the choice to do so actually makes sense in this instance. The heroic evacuation effort is told from 3 perspectives: land, sea, and air. And right off the bat, Nolan gets points for actually telling the audience this instead of making it some half-baked mystery. What I love about the varied perspectives is how it gives us a chance audience to see the same event in vastly different yet meaningful ways. A great example is the plane crash sequence. From Tom Hardy's perspective, we watch him and his wingman get into a dogfight with a German aircraft. After sustaining critical damage, Hardy's wingman is forced to ditch the plane in the ocean. From up in the air, Hardy sees his buddy waving his hand, assumes this means he's alright, and flies off to continue the mission. However, later in the film, it's revealed that the landing caused the Spitfire's cockpit to jam, and that the waving Tom Hardy saw was actually a plea for help. This recontextualization is brilliant because it actually follows the narrative structure set forth by the movie. The reveal is satisfying and harrowing in equal measure because the audience doesn't feel cheated. But The Witcher misunderstands what people like about shocking reveals. It's not the sudden recontextualization that's impressive, it's the satisfying payoff to a well-crafted setup. And this is why The Witcher feels pretentious. It wants people to think that it's clever without doing the hard work to actually earn that reputation. No matter how many fancy aesthetic choices you make or narrative elements you employ, if they don't actually mean anything, it will not make your story good. If you've learned something from this video, subscribing and watching another is the best way you can support this channel. I'm Dylan, and this has been The Writer's Block.